Good morning. This is an update on the Florence Udpate Center. I'm headed down to Washington. It's about 7 a.m. And yes, I'm in the car moving at 55 miles an hour. Everybody's passing me, but I am being safe. This is when I can think. Just got off the phone with Kerry Hicks at Duke Energy. They are doing some mashups of flood data, road closures, and determining real time as much as they can the GIS layer data to feed into Duke Energy. She's in planning, and she chairs our operational readiness level group within the SICE. And she feeds her information from planning into ops, and then ops can then determine what roads are opened or closed, and they can predict estimated time of restoration, or ETRs. Right now, they can't even predict ETRs to customers that are in homes still because of the flooding. And the waters are going to continue to rise, apparently, before they go down. So it's a little tenuous as far as when this would happen, but Duke is, working 24/7. They got shifts going on. It's just amazing to see the utilities and how they mobilize people and how dedicated they are to their craft. So anyway, I asked Kerry if there's a way the SICE could maybe some down the road get hold of data or produce derivatives of data that would be very interesting. We have a lot of people now doing flood maps and road open close stuff. It'd be great if we could crowdsource some of that and get better data from the private sector as far as what is a reliable source of information on what is open or closed. Certainly, Persia Payne Hurley at North Carolina's private sector desk is doing a lot of that. She gets a lot of email and information from police, social media feedback, and they keep a running list of highways open or closed. I saw one yesterday where they were basically diverting people that were heading to Florida on 95 to go west into Virginia and down that way, down 81, just because 95 has got so many issues with flooding in the North Carolina, South Carolina area. It's amazing. I've been down that road. It's amazing the water's that high. So today we have we'll have potentially some visitors from some of our federal partners coming in to see the Ops Center. As I mentioned earlier, we are co-located down at EEI. We're on the 3rd floor. They're on the 4th floor. But it's given us great insight into some of their data needs and some of the requests that they're getting from members they're bringing to us. So we're kind of serving as a resource help desk right now. Everybody's in position that's going to be in position, I think, right now. So we're kind of serving the private sector now as a resource. Hey, we need this. Hey, we need that. Hey, we need this. Where can we find that? The other thing, too, as I mentioned before, what's working well is keeping government in the loop. If we take an action with the private sector, we can let the states know what we're doing. So it just reduces the cycles that, for resource requests. And maybe someday we'll get this all organized so we know, we can divide the work and everybody does a piece of the work instead of right now we have a lot of organizations trying to do, all the work or part of the work together. There's a lot of overlap still. So maybe we can move towards more effective resource management someday. Anyway, so we should have our executive dashboard running today, where we can monitor specific things, red, yellow, green, for executives. And then the other thing we'll be doing today is we're still having trouble with the Fleet Move email. We moved to new email servers, and the Fleet Move email is an email forwarding service where if I send an email to Fleet Move, it immediately goes to a whole big list of people. So it's boom, it's in and out 24/7. When we moved over to our secure email servers, we had some issues. It wasn't forwarding attachments. Then it was exposing all the email addresses. So it's just tweaking. It's just the technology thing. Once we get it dialed in, it's going to be fine. But who knew when we did the transition that we'd have a hurricane in the midst of a server transition? But at any rate, as far as new interested parties. We are up north of 600 new emails that have opted in. We're doing it different this year. Last year we got spreadsheets of people. We just added them in there. We didn't know who they were, but the county sent in a bunch, or Texas or Florida sent them some. So now we're running everybody through a segmentation process where we send everybody to siceusa.org. So everybody goes to that, and then they tell us about themselves: government, private sector. If you're government, are you local, state, federal? Are you transportation, EMS, blah, blah, blah. So we segment everybody, okay? So at the end of the day, we've got 25 buckets focused by sector, by topic, area of interest. So we can really zero in and tailor our message. So that gives us tier 1 of this identity vetting, is you telling us about yourself. Now, tier 2 makes sure it's you who's logged in claiming to be yourself, right? So step 2 is identity verification on login. So we've tested that with a pilot where we used a $1.99 credit card charge to validate your identity, your mailing address, and you're a U.S. citizen. Then we get a cell phone and an email, and you sign an agreement, and all without issuing a card, a credential. So we didn't want to issue the private sector didn't want to issue a credential because you can't scale quickly. And so we've got this process down. It's 2-tiered at the moment. So the first tier is siceusa.org. The second tier we'll click in later. But that's how we separate the general audience from the vetted audience, right? Because the only people who are going to see the SICE data are vetted. And but at least now when we vet your identity, we can make sure that we can create groups now that are food sector vetted people. Boom. So now we have a way to create the honeycomb cells that where we can put each honeycomb cell as a use case, and in there we can put the right people, the right data, and boom, now we've got products where you can make decisions very quickly. And using the Priority 5 solution, which for our ops center, that gives us the ability to do the physical architecture and security of the honeycomb architecture, okay? So the private sector selected that one because of the top secret clearance level things that it handles in the district when working with Secret Service, FBI, all the federal agencies down there, along with the state of Maryland, Virginia, and DC. But it also does something which is even more important. It records everything, and now we go back and we can do analytics and what if scenarios. So we can actually create exercises from real world events. All this stuff is recorded. So in the blue sky day now, we can go back and use this as a exercise tool and what if scenarios, so we can create use cases. So what if I lose this river? What sectors are impacted by that? This tool does that as a result of a major investment in New Jersey on the Exit 14 projects that Joe Picciano did. So yeah, it's an incident response tool, that's great, but there's several of those. Okay, this one actually does blue sky day stuff for planning, training, and exercising, and analytics, which is what we needed. We needed a analytic tool on steroids that could look at multiple sectors in a secure environment. That was the trick. And so Priority 5 gives us that capability, so we're very grateful to them. And Chris Geldart is running that ops piece because, one, he was the District of Columbia Homeland Security Emergency Manager for 7 years, so this guy knows operations, he knows public-private, and he understands where the opportunities are to stay out of the way of processes that are too big and too cumbersome and too complicated. So having him on board has been a huge help, and he's been really a good advisor to everybody involved in the process, so hats off to Chris. Anyway, so that's it for this morning. I'll have another update this afternoon, but right now it's flood zones and trying to get people in to do power, and now supply chain access and re-entry is a big deal. So I'm sure I'll be having some dedicated time to support any efforts with that and working with the states to make sure we get out the information they published already about access, so that when they finish life safety missions, they can now focus on access. So for the private sector watching this, you can't get access until they're done doing their life safety and rescue. So that's an important thing to know. They're just heads down on saving lives, and getting vehicles into areas is just they don't have enough manpower is usually what happens in the impacted states. So anyway, that's it for this morning.